Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the fourth lecture in our series, One Nation Under God, Religion's Impact on the United States. And before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to also thank our funder for this program, the Florida Humanities Organization, based over in Sarasota, I think is where they're located. They're a wonderful organization. They have a lot of programs. If you've never heard of them, go to their website. A lot of the programs like what we are doing are for free because it's a very community focused organization and they want education and outreach to be able to be available for everybody, primarily in Florida, but since we're doing this on Zoom, people are invited from all over. I also want to thank the Center for Jewish Studies here at University of Florida, which has done a lot of collaboration related to the series, and quite a number of our speakers are from the CJS. And speaking of UF, under the auspices of the Center for Jewish Studies is the Price Library of Judaica. And for each of the lectures, we have a link, which you can see in the weekly Shabbat Shalom. If you don't get our Shabbat Shalom, ask me and I will send you the link. But they are doing corresponding data and research files, so that if you want more information, for instance, about spirituality and religion, beyond what Daniel's going to talk to us about today, you can go to their website and there's a whole page with links for each of the lectures, which is really, really a cool thing that they agreed to do this for us. Let's see. Oh, and I mentioned before we started that if you have to step away, if you miss any of this, watch it back again or share it with people. The JCNCF has a YouTube channel, so you can go to our YouTube channel. Again, the link is always in the Shabbat Shalom. If you don't get it, let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. And you can always play it back in any of the previous lectures or other events that we've done on Zoom, which we've recorded. Okay, and if you joined in after I said housekeeping, please keep your sound off or I will mute you if I hear ambient noise in the background. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, who I have to say I know from a long time ago. We were actually on the one-year program at Hebrew University, where a lot of American students and Canadians and other people go for their junior year in college abroad. So in 1982-83, I met this gentleman because he was part of my sort of group of friends that overlapped with different groups. And we're Facebook friends for a long time. And then when I heard it was another one-year program friend who told me about your book and your artwork, your photography, and they said you should reach out to Daniel because he would be a great person for the spirituality and religion lecture. So if you haven't had a chance to read his bio, I'm going to read it very briefly, and then we're going to turn it over to Daniel, and please save your questions till the end. Daniel Epstein is a marketing and innovation consultant based in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was previously a Harley Procter marketing director at Procter Gamble, where he was employed for 21 years. He has an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management in Evanston, Illinois, and a BBA in accounting from Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. He has been long involved in community service, focused on reconciliation and dialogue across racial, religious, and ethnic communities. So Daniel, with that, please take it away, and I can't wait to hear and see what you have to show us.
Thank you. Well, thanks for everyone. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was a good USY kid. So I spent a lot of time with all my friends in Central and North Florida. And so I'm very familiar with your area. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just pull up my slides and I will just shift over there. Just give me a second.
While Daniel's pulling that up, I will also say that at the end of his discussion, before questions, we will have a brief poll. So please take a moment to answer it. Now I'm quiet again, and I see your presentation. So you're Daniel.
Okay, great. Well, I want to share with you a project I've been working on for 20 years. It's called Portraits in Faith. You'll hear at the end of the presentation that it's also become an exhibit and educational program called Seeing the Other. And let me just share with you a bit about this project. Well, that's me when I was a bit thinner. So my story, as you kind of heard from the intro, is I'm not a Jewish community professional. I'm not a professional in the nonprofit world or the art world. I'm squarely in the capitalist flywheel I was at Procter Gamble for 21 years. I became like an internal marketing professor, and today I specialize in applying cognitive and behavioral science to marketing and innovation, both in public health and in large companies. And I was really fortunate that I was traveling the world for Procter and Gamble, um, and I had to travel a lot. And I think it intersected with a time in my life where I feel like I needed something more spiritually, and and this probably reflects what I jokingly like to remember when a psychiatrist in Boston once described me as a young man who wasn't happy about much. And well, that was true. And that was a long time ago, and it's gratefully not who I am today. But you might say that the religiosity of my youth, uh, the fact that I knew how to daven and that I was USY president for the Southeast, and that I was closely identified with my Judaism. I loved that in terms of identity, and I love Jewish ritual, but the spiritual parts of Judaism, I don't think I had taken on. And I think this was at a time when I was trying to mature. And this project actually helped me. And I think this project helped me become a better Jew. And this project helped me become a better citizen of the world and a better what I would call a mystic, one who is in love with the mystery of God across and not in religion, but just as a spiritual and metaphysical concept. And so today I can say I feel grateful, I feel connected, I feel of service. I don't feel like the young man who wasn't happy about much anymore. And I hope you'll see how this project has and continues to help me heal in those ways. Um, so essentially, what have I done? I've gone around the world and I've asked people these questions. What is your concept of God or a higher power? What is your earliest memory of faith, whatever that means to you? What was the first time in your life you feel like you had to or you chose to rely upon God as you understand God? I don't make any assumptions about what that means for someone. Um, Tell me about a time you doubted your faith. What happened? Um, Doubt, I think, has become a really important part of the journey of faith for me. And just to uh, share this little tidbit, I was very fortunate to spend time with Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, and in his interview, he said, "Doubt scrapes the barnacles off of our faith so it doesn't become superstition." So I have found this question about doubts to be really so powerful. And then I ask people, what are you most grateful for? What is your greatest wish? Do you have a message? And what would you like people to know about you when they see your portrait? And something I should mention is I'm a photographer. And so I started making black and white portraits of each of these people that I've interviewed. And today, so I've been working on this project for 20 years. 10 years ago, um, I had been urged by people for the first 10 years while I was working on this to start sharing it. And I was very fortunate because of work connections that Ken Burns became an advisor and has been uh, providing me with his thoughts on how I should take this forward. And he said something very important to me. He said, have the courage to say this isn't a film. Everybody wants to make a PBS special, but that's not what everything is meant to be. And as I thought about it, okay, well, I've interviewed 500 people in 27 countries. I could never afford time or money to prepare all of that for production at once. And so I decided to create a website. And so this is just a little image of our website. It's been up for 10 years. And last year, I published a coffee table book with the first 125 portraits and interviews and reflections. And so this, like I said, it's 500 people in 27 countries. I've been working on this 20 years. I just checked right before tonight's presentation, and we're at 490,000 views on YouTube of the interviews. And we have an email list of 4,000 active subscribers. And so, this project has taken me around the world. It's been profoundly healing. And the best way I can share with you to start tonight's presentation is to give you a sense of these people who I've met around the world. You'll see that my photography these are not glamour shots. What I say is I'm trying to reflect the true spirit of each person, especially as seen through their eyes. And so I'm going to share with you something maybe you've never had before, which is I call it a photographic meditation. If we had more time, I would share with you more, but this is 5 minutes with about 30 portraits that I'm going to share with you. And I would just ask you to kind of sit back and treat this like a real meditation, treat this and receive these people. And I'm just going to open it up afterwards and ask for what thoughts and feelings got evoked for you when looking at these portraits. Let me just make sure I have the sound on correctly. Share computer sound. Okay, so please receive these 30 people.
I am a pilgrim and a stranger, traveling through this wearisome land. I have a home in that yonder city, good Lord, and it's not made by hand. I've got a mother, a sister, and a brother who all have gone this way before. I am determined to go and meet them, good Lord, over on that other shore. I'm going down to the river of Jordan, just to bathe my weary soul. If I could just touch hem of his garment, good Lord, then I know he would make me whole. I am a pilgrim and a stranger, traveling through this that yonder city, good Lord, but it's not made by hand.
I'd love for you to come on camera and share any thoughts or feelings that came up for you as you watched that.
Anyone would like to say something? You can, oh, wait, my husband wants to say something. Hang on, he's floating. Go ahead, Charles.
Hey, Daniel.
Hang on, let me get rid of my background, sorry.
For me, the majority of the people, and obviously this is just my take on it, there are about 2 or 3 that clearly were in different places, the family that were upset, but everybody else, and the gentleman in Cairo, and I think there was one other, they all seemed to be at peace. That was what I took from the pictures. So I get it, they were, you know, they're posing at some level, but they all looked peaceful.
Yeah, I think so. I do interview people for the most part before I do their portrait, and so I think uh, they are primed, as we would say in behavioral science. I think that they are in a certain space of gratitude and reflection, and I don't really have them pose so much. I just say we find a place, and I just start taking a bunch of pictures around them, and I often tell them, please have in mind the things you told me you were most grateful for, or please have in your mind the journey that you've been on and where you are today. So it's really not that much direction. And it was pretty clear to me early on, as soon as I started this project, that the bullseye of faith was gratitude. And in fact, I had been known to say that gratitude was God, that being in a state of gratitude was a state of connectedness to God. I have a very famous person, actually, who I interviewed a couple months ago, who wrote the foreword to my book, Valerie Kaur, who wrote a book called See No Stranger. And I asked her what her concept of God was, and she said, God is a way of being. And certainly I have found in this project that gratitude is the center of that way of being. So I think that at peaceness and gratitude were highly connected, Charles. But thanks for your comment. Anybody else want to share?
By the way, lovely photos. I look forward to looking at the rest of them.
Okay, we have a couple of non-shy people. Heath, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, my dog just started barking.
It's okay. We like dogs.
Okay. Well, I had a lot of thoughts, a whole lot of thoughts. And I found the experience very emotional. I teared up quite a bit during it. I think that the photos are beautiful. I think that I did sense the spirit of these people when they were feeling centered in their own experience. The other, that was a term that came up really early for me in seeing the photos, because everybody's different, they're in different places, they don't know each other, but the common denominator is faith. But that's like an individual faith, it's not a communal faith that we're seeing in these photos. And I kind of envied them in, not in a bad way, just in a in a noticeable way, envied them in their confidence in their faith, because I have more doubts than I have faith. And it also made me think about how there are so many people who are walking the peaceful path, and yet we have a planet that's being destroyed by conflict and war, and so many people who can't get along.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I will tell you that as part of this journey, well, I should mention growing up in Atlanta, especially being a scrawny kid, Jewish kid carrying a cello to the bus stop, I was prime target for early anti-Semitism and getting my ass kicked. And so you might say I have felt like the other for a long time. Now, by the way, Black Lives Matter, like for many of us, made me really confront my white privilege. That's another story. We can talk about that. But I have felt like the other, and I have felt called to bring people together. And as I've done this project, I kind of already believed that there were many paths. You know, I don't think we as Jews think we have the only religion in the world. We try to, you know, the righteous of all nations will have a place in the world to come. Of course, as I like to say, our concept of the world to come is very vague, so we're not promising you too much. But you know, I have come to see that faith, that deep faith that we sometimes are jealous of other people, can be defined in so many ways that are more accessible than the traditional views of faith. And that's part of what I've learned in this project too, that there's a sense of connectedness with all of, not just all of humanity, all of creation. One of the great blessings of this project is I've spent a lot of time with indigenous people around the world, especially in the Northern Territory of Australia. And, you know, there's a connectedness to all of creation, the rock, the tree, the weather, that we don't always have. So, I don't know, I have come to, I have been jealous, and then I have come to be at peace that there's a wide continuum. I happen to believe that we as Jews should talk more about spirituality and faith. You know, Judaism, again, doesn't have much of salvation and doesn't really operate on faith. It operates on Na'aseh v'nishma, do and then you'll understand. So, but I found that lacking. So I actually love to encourage Jewish community to talk more about spirituality and to talk more about faith defined in a way that works for us. Anyway, it's a long response. Who else would like to share?
Come on, people, don't be shy. This is the type of topic that it encourages conversation.
Let's take one more comment before I move on.
Well, I actually have a question. I mean, having been, I think, I can't say that everybody who's on the Zoom is Jewish, but I think the vast majority are. In your journey, in your photography, and your research, was there anything that surprised you when you learned about other religions that maybe either drew you closer to your own Judaism or potentially moved you further away from it?
Yeah, well, this is so hard with presentations like this, you know, because you have your slides in a certain order, but I'm going to go ahead and flip forward to a slide that really addresses this. Because I think it's, let me just go ahead and respond to the question at hand.
I did a good segue for you.
Exactly. You know, my big conclusion about this project is that respecting all religions is not about respecting their theology or their dogma. I don't have to believe that Christ rose on the third day to honor the path of the Christian. I don't have to have a particular belief about transubstantiation of what happens during communion for me to honor the person who chooses that path. What I have to do is I have to see the other and saying there is a human being trying to connect with the divine. I should probably have that D capitalized. And this is what I really want to share, which is you know how, and again, you know how as young Jews, and Jerry Seinfeld does a routine about this, we were all taught about trichinosis. God forbid we get trichinosis from eating pork. It turns out trichinosis is not the big threat that we all thought it was. And I don't think the fear of other religions and the concepts that power them is something we have to be afraid of. And so I put this slide together that has helped me, which is, you see the second point. I love to wrestle with God. It's my main avocation. But you know what? Islam means to submit to God, and I need to submit to God. Again, I have a concept of God that is not literal, external, and personal. I have a concept of God that is the great connectedness, the sacredness in the world that I choose to participate in. And I need to submit to that. And you know what? I needed to learn about unconditional love. And I have learned that from the message that Jesus shared, not Christianity, not Christian theology, but what Christians take from the figure of Jesus. And as I said a minute ago, I've been fortunate to spend time with indigenous peoples in North America, in US, Canada, Australia, I'm sure some other places, South America. And I've been blown away by their connection to animals and all creation. I could go into stories of what I learned in Australia about the connection to animals. I certainly can relate to Buddhism and the need to eliminate suffering in my life, but especially the suffering I caused myself and others. Turns out I was the main cause of most of my suffering. Who knew? Many of us think of Hinduism as polytheistic, but it's actually not. It's monotheistic. The different gods are manifestations, representations of the one. And you know what? My favorite interview in the whole project, which you're about to hear, is with an atheist. And do you remember from elementary school when the teacher said the empty set is a subset of all sets? Well, I'm a big fan of what I have learned from atheists and humanists about God and about the divine connection. And so what I say, and you see this here at the bottom of the page, is I believe all the energies are needed. I believe that religion is cultural, man-made, holy, sacred, defines and gives us community, but I don't believe any one religion has a monopoly on the God connection. I'm very proud to be Jewish. There are certain times of year, well, actually, to quote my rabbi once said, Daniel, when people are 2 day a year Jews, it's usually not Simchas Torah and Purim. But that's actually not true. I come on Yom Tif, but I find the high holidays very meaningful, not because they're the high holidays, but because of the reflection and the cheshbon nefesh, the accounting of one's soul. So I find all these energies to be helpful. I find orthodoxy of any kind to kind of be a bit of a limiting view if we can't see the other person on their journey, and to say, oh, there's a person who's found their journey. God bless them. And I once heard a young woman at a Parliament of World Religions say, my friends ask me, how can you have dialogue with people who have exclusive truth claims? And her response was, am I having enough dialogue with people who have exclusive truth claims? So anyway, that's a long response to, I'm committed to the God connection, the divine connection. I enjoy my Judaism. I find it really meaningful. And, you know, I honor the path that anyone chooses to get there. And, you know, I choose to tap into all of these energies. There you go. The whole Megillah. So let me share with you how some people have answered some of these questions around the world. I think you'll find them really interesting. Again, I come from the Judeo-Christian world, so some of the things I was not used to. So I always love just to throw this in here because it's so different than a lot of us in the Judeo-Christian world. This is Freddie Kambacha. He's kind of a brother in Mumbai because he was also someone who ran from accounting as a profession. In his case, he became a Zoroastrian fire temple priest. And here's how he describes God. Hang on, let me just, okay, you got that?
What is your idea of God? How do you
What is your
experience
idea
God?
of God?
I see God in nature. You know, like the most concrete example of God is air. Air is something which we cannot see, but all the time we feel. We feel cold, we feel hot. Air makes us feel everything, but we cannot see air. So air is such an element of God, which you have to just feel and believe. You know, and my religion teaches me that my religion is always depends on elements of God, nature, like plants, air, earth, water, human beings and animals, mountains, and of course sky, clouds. The seven creations of God, and I strongly believe in. And that those elements of nature make me believe that there is God somewhere.
What is your idea?
And while that may sound very different, I know a lot of us who are connected to sustainability and the environment, we see God through nature and the elements as well. This is my favorite interview in the whole project, and I'm going to let Tom Boy-Shop from Brazil, who declares himself an atheist, what he has to say about his concept of God. And I hope you'll see why this is my favorite out of all the 500.
Well, I don't pray. I don't. I don't feel the need to pray. But I do believe that faith is something that we created, we humans. I don't think a dog prays. I don't think a plant prays. I think it's something that we developed, that something that we found the need for it, and instead of God creating us, I think we created God. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that, because I think it's just the concept. And for me, faith is not believing that this is the most important thing. That having things is the most important thing. And I don't mean to, I don't want to make a vote for poverty. It's not that. I want to have things. I just don't want things to have me. And I rather create stuff. I rather create friendships. So for me, faith is in the relationship, not going to a church. I mean, if you want to go to church, go ahead. I mean, you have the right to go. I'm not saying don't go to church. I'm just saying don't invite me. Go by yourself.
He actually goes on to say, I said, well, if you had a concept of God, what would it be? And Tom says, well, do you remember the caveman and the cave woman? When they ate the buffalo, they thought they would get the strength of the buffalo. But before they would eat the buffalo, they would thank the buffalo spirit. He said, I like that. He said, I like the buffalo spirit. Today we have Macintosh, but we don't have the buffalo spirit. The one of my favorite questions is the earliest memory of faith. This is Renee Morgan Brooks. She was a music minister in Louisville, then got ordained as a minister. This is what she had to say about faith being experienced through music.
I started off as a Baptist, And then my mother decided that she was going to look into Jehovah's Witness. And that never took for me, because by that time I think I was in 16, and my grandmother lived with us. And so my grandmother was a Baptist born and bred, and she was going to be a Baptist when she's dead kind of thing. So at age 16 and there's no father in the house, then that means, because my father had died when I was 5, that means I now have the responsibility of driving my grandmother to the Baptist church, coming back and getting my mother and to the religious chauffeur run. However, Sunday mornings were all about fixing hair and fixing waffles and getting everybody situated and ready to go to church, and singing. My grandmother and my mother both sang in the choir. So while I'm preparing to take them their separate ways, there are always gospel songs that are being sung, songs of faith. My mother was a breadwinner, my grandmother was the homemaker. And when it was hard for my mother, she would sing, And it's that kind of song that I could just imagine Harriet Tubman singing. I couldn't hear nobody pray. Couldn't hear nobody pray, Lord, way down yonder by myself, and I couldn't hear nobody pray. But when it became fulfilled, she'd sing things like, said I wasn't gonna tell nobody, but I couldn't keep it to myself. No, I couldn't keep it to myself. No, I couldn't keep it to myself. I said I wasn't gonna tell nobody, but I could keep it to myself what the Lord has done for me. And then she just squeezed herself like this and said, thank you, Lord. Oh yeah, that's what I was raised with. So there was no chance not to be connected with this flow of spirit.
I was really fortunate to interview Anna Halpern, who was considered the mother of postmodern dance. She died in the last few years at age 100. Some of you may know of her. Just a remarkable woman. She's credited with taking dance off of the proscenium into nature, into the audience, doing a lot of work with AIDS patients, dementia patients. Just a remarkable woman. And this is her earliest memory of faith, growing up on the west side of Chicago with a Hasidic grandfather, and how he inspired her to pursue dance, or how she took the message of dance from her grandfather.
Okay, this is Anna Halpern, and I live here in Kentfield, California, right outside of San Francisco.
Wonderful.
Old. And every Saturday we would go visit my grandparents who lived on the west side of Chicago, where all the Jewish community lived. But they weren't just Jewish community, it was a recent immigrants. And I would go to see my grandfather in the synagogue because that's where he was on Saturday. And I would be asked to sit up in the balcony because that's where all the women were to sit. So I was very proud to be able to sit with the women, and here I was, this little girl, and I'd walk down the block all by myself, and it was a regular ritual for me that every Saturday I would go visit my grandfather in synagogue and would go upstairs and sit with the women, and then I'd look down over the balcony and see if I could find my grandfather. And my experience was just so beyond anything I had ever seen in my life at that time. To see this very vigorous man with a long white beard and white silky hair jumping up and down with great ecstasy and and I would hear these kinds of words that I had never heard in my life, and it was all so mysterious. I just couldn't put it all together. I don't understand, was this really my grandfather? Or the way he was flinging his arms in the air and chanting these unusual sounds that were obviously in some form of Hebrew or Yiddish. But there was something that would move me in a way that I had never, as a child, experienced. And I felt that, well, at this moment, when my grandfather was dancing like this, that he must be God. Because as a 5-year-old, my image of God was an old man with long white beard and long silky white hair. And I thought, oh, this is how God prays. And that was so embedded in my awareness. And then, even to this day, I can picture it as if I were there now. And then, when it was all over, he would know that I was there, and he would wave to me, and I would go down and meet him, and he would pick me up in his arms, and he would hug me and pat me, and then we would hold hands, and we would go back home. And I thought, oh, this is a blessed moment, because I'm holding God's hand, and we are dancing together. And that image has stayed with me all my life, as if that's what I've been searching for my whole life, is to find a dance that would mean as much to me as his dance had meant to him.
So I ask people, what was the first time in your life you had to or chose to rely upon God as you understand God? This is an incredible man who's also passed away. By the way, I should mention, I'm sure at least 35, 40 of the people in the project of the 500 have passed away. And of course, that is sad. And on the other hand, hang on a second. On the other hand, two things. One, I know that many of the families of the people who I've interviewed who have passed away come to my website to watch the interview of their parent or their loved one. And that's very meaningful to know that I was able to capture their story, their sacred, their most intimate story. And the other thing is, at some point, all of these people will be dead, myself included. And without thinking of that as this horrific thing, this will be an artifact, a moment in time in civilization of what faith was in its many manifestations at this time of history. And I hope that that will be not just healing, but powerful. This is Sheikh Abdulaziz Bukhari, passed away in the last few years, a great worker for peace, whose family has lived in Jerusalem for 500 years.
Actually, when I was living in the state, I had a heart attack. And they took me to the hospital. And after they checked me out, they said, you have to have an open heart surgery. And but you can't tell the doctors, no? It's okay. So they start rolling me to the operation room. And I was laying on the stretcher going to the operation room, and I see the ceiling above me. And all of a sudden, the ceiling disappeared. There's no more ceiling. And I saw just the sky, and I said, what am I doing here in the United States? What am I doing here? Am I doing things for God or for myself? And I said, God, I've been neglecting you for many years. if you give me another chance, I will work to please you and to do things you want me to do. And for sure, after I got out of the operation, the amazing thing, the doctor couldn't believe. After the third day of my operation, and they didn't put even one bandage on my wound. All my stitches healed in 3 days. And the doctor, he's like, there's not even one small problem I had. The wound healed so fast, the doctor was like, how that happened? And after 13 days exactly, he said, you can fly back to Jerusalem. Because I told him, I'm not leaving the hospital unless I'm able to go to Jerusalem. So after 13 days, he said, yes, you can fly to Jerusalem. And I went from the airport, from the hospital to the airport directly. And I got on the plane, and I came to Jerusalem. I left everything behind. Because what I was doing just for this world, and I realized I'm not doing anything for God. So I came back and I started updating my knowledge about religion, about God, and start preaching and start working for God more than I was relying on my father, and now I said, no, it's time for me to start. And after that, my father passed away, so I became a sheikh.
And this is a colleague of mine, Rada Ezeldin from Cairo, who had an amazing experience on Hajj, where she relied upon God.
There's one very important experience. I met my husband at the age of 34, and as of the age of 21, I was very much interested in getting married and having a family. I was always dreaming of having 6 kids, and strangely enough, I was also dreaming of not working, years to find the right person. And this journey of finding the right person was not easy. So it had lots of frustrations, lots of ups and downs, hopes and frustrations. And it was not easy, and especially in our culture, where there's a lot of pressure to marry at an early age, like, between around maybe 20, 22. If you're 25, you're already, labeled as a spinster, or there's something wrong with you. So you can imagine, the pressures that I've been through from family and friends and so on. But I did not want to give up, and I had a lot of opportunities. I did not want to get married just for the sake of, getting married and getting the social acceptance from the society. So I was looking for, someone very special. And this journey of search was very painful to me. Then as I became older and I got into the 30s, people started to tell me, you may not have children because it becomes more difficult with age and so on. So it was quite painful. But then the very strong thing that happened to me, I remember that it was the second week of December in 2001. I was in the Holy Land in Saudi Arabia, and I was inside the Holy Mosque in Mecca, and I was praying to God, to help me, find the right person and so on. But then at a certain moment, I felt that, in a way, I surrendered my personal will to God's will. And at this exact moment, it was different, because before that I was praying and asking God, to help me find the right person. But at this point in time, I felt that, I have no power, no matter what I want to do in terms of, planning and thinking and trying to make things happen, if I don't give my will to God's will, it will not happen. And this thing gave me a lot of strength, and it moved me spiritually very much. And 2 weeks later, I met my husband, and 1 year later, we got married. But I still remember this moment in Mecca. I was in the second floor of the mosque, looking at the Kaaba down, and I was praying, and I got this strong feeling of, really, it's all God's will. And then after that, I realized this in life. You have to do your effort and you have to do everything, but at the end of the day, 90% of what happens to you, or even more, is because of God's will.
And the last question I'm going to share with you tonight is a time you doubted your faith. And this is Brother Bo Sanchez. He's a Catholic preacher in Manila. And just to give you a trigger warning, he's going to talk about sexual abuse.
Why was I molested? Why was I sexually abused? Maybe because I deserved it. Maybe I'm dirty. Maybe I'm ugly. I became addicted to pornography because, any kind of addiction is really trying to escape the sadness, the emptiness, the shame within you. Even more than pornography, I became addicted to pleasing people. I began to project onto God what I felt about myself. Maybe God is also ashamed of who I was. Maybe God didn't like me also, because I didn't like myself. And maybe God is a God with a checklist of my sins. He fell again in pornography. Oh boy, what's new? I cannot pinpoint a particular day and time where suddenly I realized he wasn't like that. But gradually, it just grew on me that there is this God who accepts me as I am, and who loves me and enjoys me, who likes me. Doesn't just love me, he likes me. He likes all of me.
So as I shared from you before, I feel like I've grown profoundly, not just in my own Judaism and appreciating all of it, but also respecting other people's journeys. And as I said, I have learned from all of these religions and no religions at all, to be grateful and to be connected and to seek to be of service. Something interesting happened. I thought this project was everybody gets to tell their story around the world. And then a dear friend of mine sent me this book by the creator of StoryCorps that many of you may know of from NPR. And David Issei, the creator of StoryCorps, wrote a book called Listening is an Act of Love. And I realized, oh my gosh, this project is not about telling your story. It's about listening to someone's story. It's about receiving somebody's story and getting out of the way, not interrupting, not trying to tell my part of the story, my version of something that was similar, but to receive someone's story as sacred and to say thank you. And so that's how I evolved into this concept of sacred listening, which I call receiving the story of someone, especially someone you perceive to be the other. And I conduct sacred listening workshops. And I've also just finished our first exhibit with this photography called Seeing the Other. This was at the University of Chicago Laboratory School's Corvus Gallery until this morning. It just finished a 3-month run this morning. And I worked with 20 4th through 12th graders on this concept of the other. When have you felt like the other? Who do you see as the other? What can we do to dismantle our misperceptions of others? And I even engaged kids as young as 4th grade, as you see here, in sacred listening. Not about theological concepts. We focused on things like What's your earliest memory? What's your greatest wish? What are you most grateful for? And I'm very pleased to say that the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky, which is a museum to Muhammad Ali's career, but also his conversion to Islam and his decision not to go to Vietnam and getting kicked out of boxing for 3 years. Some of you may remember. They are going to bring this into a 3,000-foot gallery for a year starting June 24. So we're creating this Seeing the Other exhibit and educational program in addition to the publishing of my portraits. Anyway, I know we have a few minutes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to, yeah, Charles is sitting here saying it was fantastic. Would anybody like to ask a question? I'm going to also launch the poll if I can find it. There we go. So if you take a moment to please answer this. We are grant funded, so this is part of our research, basically a research component of it. So I would love if you answer. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts, or are we all digesting?
I'm not, can you hear me?
Hi, Renee.
Hi there. Yeah, I just had a few things comments and then a question. You know, just because Judaism has a lot of the stuff that you feel like you're missing, that, you know, especially in the indigenous religions. I don't know if you've read any Art Green about panentheistic Judaism, and quoting Zalman, who was my Rebbe as well. He encouraged people to get their spiritual vitamins wherever they find them, and would tell stories about, you know, holy man jams where they're, you know, they're doing similar things. I really love the pictures. I belong to a interfaith women's book club called, we have a chapter of Daughters of Abraham here in Gainesville. And so this, in fact, we met last night, and it's just a treasure in my life all the time, seeing the different perspectives. We all look at the same thing from different perspectives, and it's just been totally beautiful. Another thing is, I just want to mention, you've probably heard of Humans of New York.
Yeah, I love it.
I started Humans of Gainesville.
Nice.
I've been doing it also for 10 years, like I just randomly accosting people, and I have my, the questions aren't as deep, and I don't do Brandon Stanton gets down and, you know, would ask people their darkest moment and everything. But anyway, check it out, because some of the people who are here tonight have been featured. But anyway, and the only other comment that I wanted to make is, you know, how did you find your subjects, and did you feel limited by language? Because obviously, you know, I don't know if you had any translated interviews or anything.
A lot. Real quickly, I make full use of being a marketing director in a large corporation. I know how to find and direct resources. So I hire freelance producers wherever I am going. And I say, you know, feel free to pick from your circle of friends and contacts, but I'd like to interview 3 to 4 people a day for however many days I'm staying on in your city, people who have a compelling story that they want to share. You know, I don't see the people who say no. The only person I ever saw who said no was a Haredi rabbi in Caracas, who said, well, you can take my portrait, but it can't be next to anyone who's made different religious decisions than me, because I can't equate what they've done with what I've done. I'm like, okay, that's not the project. Geh gesund, you know. But that's what I do. I hire producers. So for example, I've just hired a producer for Barcelona, middle of July, where I'm going. Yes, Lynn. Oh, you're on mute, Lynn.
Yeah, you have to unmute.
There you go. Thank you. I loved your photos and the expressions on the people's faces, and also the stories. And I'm wondering if you had ever thought of, certainly was the younger people you interviewed, going back and talking to them again after a period of time to see exactly whether they have changed their connections and their faith, because I think a faith at least is somewhat evolving, at least for me and people I know.
What a great question. Thank you, Lynn. Well, first of all, I wasn't doing videos at the beginning. So 6 years after the start of this project in Brazil, I did go back to do videos, and there were changes. One woman had gotten pretty severe cancer. Somebody had lost a son. Other people had evolved in their faith. I do have a portrait of an Ethiopian Jewish young woman who I got back in touch with as I was publishing her interview, and she told me that, you know, she married someone who wasn't religious, and she doesn't even remember the person who I had interviewed. So we have reflections like that. That's not even the most interesting or problematic. I've interviewed people whose lives have really taken a left turn, and then the question has been raised whether I should still include them. So, for example, a really amazing American priest, beautiful Kennedy-looking man, was always the CNN priest that they had to reflect on whatever happened at the Vatican that day, based in Rome. You know, fathered a child, got kicked out of the church, as far as I know, happily married. Should I feature his story of faith? I think so. I think he's asked for privacy, and I haven't contacted him, but that's his journey, right? That's his spiritual journey. A little bit more difficult. I interviewed a man in a particular city who was a builder, ended up going bankrupt. Apparently his building materials were a bit shoddier, and he left a lot of tradespeople in his city with a lot of financial loss. And he moved out of town, moved to where his wife was from in another state. He had a beautiful story. Do I include it or do I not? So, you know, these are I haven't yet, but yeah, I mean, yes, it's absolutely dynamic and it changes. All I can claim is that I've met with people at a moment in time.
Yeah. I think when you were saying those last words, Daniel, I thought of not my quote, but life is messy. So if you're including them, yeah, life is messy. So you can't whitewash the parts that are a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so grateful that you invited me here tonight. If you like the portraits and you like the interviews, we have 125 of them on our website. The website is called portraitsinfaith.org. And there is a particular tab which is called the gallery. And if you, here, I'll just show it to you real quick before we end. Share screen. So this is what the gallery, this is what the gallery looks like. And you literally just scroll your way through and well, so for example, here's Reb Zalman. You just click on Reb Zalman and you get taken to his portrait. So there's his portrait. And then here's the interview with him. And then here's a quote from him. And then at the bottom will be a reflection from me. And the reflections are not just about the person. The reflections are what got provoked in me by meeting this person. So for example, I've written reflections on what are the spiritual issues for transgender people, and what are the spiritual issues of homelessness for the person with a home and for those without a home. And I've written, because of meeting with an Indigenous man who was sexually abused in the residential schools in Canada, who chose not to forgive his abuser when he finally found him as an adult. I wrote a reflection on when is it the right decision to not forgive someone. So I try to write these provocative reflections, and you'll find 125 of the portraits, interviews, and reflections so far. And we're just about to start publishing the next 125 of the 500.
Wow, amazing. Daniel, Charles behind me is saying kol hakavod, if you remember your Hebrew.
Yep, I do.
Thank you, everyone. This was so wonderful, and it really was thought-provoking. And we look forward to seeing you next month, Fighting Islamophobia and Understanding Muslims on April 19th. Thank you so, so much. Daniel will be in touch. We have more things to catch up on. And everybody, yeah,
Thanks
definitely.
so much, everyone. Thank you, Heath.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.